the shadow self, this idea of an alternate you that lives the places where you intend not to live, the places where you avoid the idea of love, the idea, the reality of death. The pinnacle of these two things meeting each other, is probably a place where most of us try to live as seldom as possible. But the poetry of Emily Dickinson is one place where these two things constantly intertwine. And that is where we will spend some time today. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, now over 500 videos strong, and number two, the Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist of videos dedicated exclusively to, in my opinion, the greatest poet of all time. The poem in question today is known as The Bustle in a House, and it reads as such. The bustle in a house the morning after death is solemnest of industries enacted upon earth. The sweeping up the heart and putting love away we shall not want to use again until eternity. So I think that there are two things worth talking about with this poem. The number one thing that I want to bring into this poem, perhaps, that is not mentioned here, is the idea of shock. There is a shock after a massive life-changing event. When this shock is to the negative, I think that it is often silent. It is a shock of taking aback. Not mentioned in this poem, but if you've been in situations like this, the massive loss that is that craters your life, the massive loss that affects every moment of every day until someday down the line you do no longer think of this loss, creates a chasm of notice, a chasm of attention. The shock that you are jarred into in light of such an event, while it is not mentioned in this poem cannot really be taken in context without it. If these were just words on a page, if these did not point to a real thing, you would not get the entirety of this poem. You understand that shock. You understand the emptiness of loss. And that, because of that, that is something extraneous to the poem. Because of that, you hear the bustle in the house the morning after death. You hear that shuffling. You hear the wordless work happening around our speaker. You hear all of the void, which makes the second stanza understandable. The sweeping up the heart and putting love away we shall not want to use again until eternity. And this is, in my opinion, where the real meat of this poem is. The idea of apportionment of love. The idea that we have all of our love doled out like ribs at a barbecue, or pizza at a Super Bowl party. Well, Jimmy's going to eat 4 slices, and Amanda's only going to want 1, and she's going to eat it while no one's looking, and all of these things. You have some apportionment of love in your life. Is that true? Is that real? Is that something that is communicated through this poem and we understand it? I think that the allowance of love seems to be something Emily Dickinson is putting in this poem that is maybe you can't really identify with it at first. But I think that all you have to do is examine it a little bit longer and you realize, no, that is true. And that shock, the shock wave in your life after losing someone like this, after the void is created, spills over more than the love is apportioned out. So you have 5 units of love that you give to every member of your family. And then a catastrophe such as this happens, and all of a sudden, you have 5 units of love for all of your siblings, but you only spend 3 of them because your life bar itself is short. Some part of you has shut down. You hear often in correlation with the death of a loved one or losing a partner, a breakup, a divorce, things like that. You hear that a piece of you dies too. And that's how you often hear about it, you often hear it talked about. A piece of me died when that thing happened. But what if, as Emily Dickinson points to here, it is just that apportionment of love that is stripped away, wrapped in linens, and placed in the closet? Now, Emily Dickinson offers us some solace. Emily Dickinson tells us that we will want to use that love again in eternity. The idea of eternity in Emily Dickinson is strained. The idea of eternity in Emily Dickinson is perhaps less well defined, less explored, more vague than other ideas, the ideas of love, the ideas of death. Those things are well versed or are well documented in Emily Dickinson. Eternity, however, seems to be a phrase sort of like the religious phrases that she uses, eternity not being necessarily religious, but there is a vagueness to Emily Dickinson's idea of God. There is a vagueness to Emily Dickinson's idea of Jesus. There is a vagueness to Emily Dickinson's ideas of all things religious, and I think it is definitely on purpose, because I think that Emily Dickinson definitely had deeper thoughts about these things. But like I've said in multiple of these discussions already, Emily Dickinson wrote poetry. We have poetry from her documented, we believe, over the course of 40 years. Of course, her ideas on these things are going to change. But those ideas, through all of them, remain a little bit vague. What were Emily Dickinson's ideas of eternity? She explored them. What I mean to say by this is that she explored the ideas of God and eternity and more strictly religious ideas like that of Jesus. She explored them fairly often. She would say things definitively about them, but a lot of these things that are said about them are in question form. Eternity, however, isn't, in my opinion, often communicated in question form. It's always sort of, oh yeah, that's eternity in Emily Dickinson's poetry. The little, et cetera, et cetera. So this reference here that gives solace to us at the end of this poem, we shall not want to use again until eternity. What if we don't read it in such a reassuring way? What if we read this instead as a warning? That love that you had doled out for this family member, for this loved one, for this friend, whoever it is, you will not want to use that love again until eternity. What if this is instead a warning from Emily Dickinson that, hey, no, you've still got that love. You need to give a couple extra ladles of it to everyone else. Pass that love out. Not in the hippie way, not in the hippie way, but make sure you do not leave this life with appropriated love. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, literature is the only thing I talk about on the channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. There's poetry to be had every Monday, so hit the subscribe button if that is something you might look forward to. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.